Hey everybody, welcome back to Engadget's live CES 2021 coverage. We just wrapped up Sony's super quick keynote. I think that was like 15 minutes. I'm senior editor Devendra Hardwar, and I'm joined with senior news editor Richard Lawler. Hey Richard.
Hey, how you doing?
Doing okay. And thank you, Sony, for getting us out of here maybe a little earlier than we expected. That's fun. Did anything, let's talk about this keynote because it seemed like it just kind of whizzed by. And it's a lot of Sony like production news and showing off things like their virtual concerts. Did anything really strike you from this? And we'll talk about all the other Sony news that came out last week, actually.
It went by so quickly that I'm still trying to really interpret
Yeah.
what happened. They mentioned their drone. I think that they've shown off before, but they talked a little bit more about that. They also talked about, as you mentioned, the thing that we'd heard about last week with their professional displays, where they use the micro LED panels for things like the virtual screens. When you're filming things like The Mandalorian, they could be really
Yeah.
impressive. Other than that, I'm still trying to remember exactly what happened. It started and then it was over.
Started and was over. I mean, last I remember, there was a virtual concert, and it's something that you'll be able to access in PSVR and I guess other platforms too. But it is funny to see this is like the post Fortnite way of handling entertainment, right? Especially for the youths out there. They want to be
Yeah.
connected. They want to do this in VR because we can't do this in person right now. And they basically recreated the Sony Theater in New York, which is I kind of love that theater. I've been there a couple of times just doing different events. So that's cool, I guess, for the people who have PSVR. We're still waiting for the PS5 PSVR, right? So it's kind of a weird thing to be announcing anything for that platform now.
It's a very strange time to talk about PlayStation VR, and they did mention the PlayStation 5, which just launched, which is,
Yeah.
I think, for Sony, kind of their big electronics launch for 2021 is the PlayStation 5, but we don't know how it fits in with everything else yet. So that's going to be the story that's going to be very interesting to tell going forward. But right now, I don't know what to think really.
Yeah. Let's say this is a short and sweet CS keynote, so I won't complain too much about that. And yeah, they're leaning heavily on the PlayStation 5. But let's talk about some of the other news which everybody may not have heard. Most of Sony's CES TV news came out last week, and there was the crystal LED news that you were talking about, Richard. So those micro LED screens, enormous screens, right? Screens that are big enough to basically be walls and ceilings. So there's a lot of coverage in terms of how The Mandalorian is using that sort of setup to replace the old Hollywood projector screen or even green screen. And you look at that show, and they can achieve some really phenomenal stuff by using these micro LED displays back there. Honestly, that seems more useful than whatever Samsung's doing, right? Because they're positioning micro LED as the wall or as like TVs people will actually be able to install in their homes. But at these prices, probably $30,000, $40,000 or more, I don't think many people are going to be buying these for themselves.
Exactly. It's truly impressive technology. And Sony's been showing off this crystal LED going back to, I think, 2012.
Yeah, yeah,
But now they finally found something that it's really fit for because what it can do in terms of contrast and color reproduction is incredible. But as you said, the price is just so high that for home use, it's really out of the picture. But in these situations where you're filming these shows and the people who are doing the acting, the director can actually see what's going on and they can feel like they're in the world. And even for us, the
yeah.
home viewer, we can't tell that they're not really in the place. I think that's something that's going to be really impressive going forward.
Yeah, it's and honestly, just for shooting things, even right now, like I'm looking at some shows that are actually produced during the pandemic, and it looks weird because people can't be next to each other. You can't have any like really crowded
Yes.
rooms or anything. Whereas something like this will actually help you at least mimic different spaces and make it not just look like a fake set. I think it was really cool. If you guys look at the special features for the Mandalorian that's on Disney Plus, I forget the exact name for that, but they go into a lot of the production of that show. And the really cool thing is that micro LEDs in these big LED screens, they reflect, right? They produce light. And these are things that get reflected on things like the Mandalorian's armor. So they cast
Yes.
like very realistic lighting on actors and settings and everything. So it's not just like green screen. You don't have that weird cutout effect where everybody just seems pasted onto an environment. So that's pretty cool. I'm kind of digging that we're going back to projection tech in a weird way, except now it's just all LEDs instead of rear projection.
Yeah, and as you said, the getting the lighting and the shadowing on the person or the materials in the environment is such a huge step and really makes everything feel so much more realistic.
In other tech, so I mean that's cool tech. You will probably never see that in action, but maybe you'll see it in action in some shows or something, right? The big TV announcements for Sony this year, they're going to have new, new Bravia OLEDs, new Bravia LCDs, but the real interesting tech they're betting on is the Bravia. Was it the XR cognitive processor? It's the cognitive processor XR chip, and these are going to be in the Bravia XR TVs. And this is worth talking about because Sony as a company, right, is always about image processing and how they kind of handle that compared to a lot of other companies. So, Sony's been building TVs for a while. They kind of have this weird nerdy obsessive streak in terms of handling imagery, and you compare it to something like how, LG may handle image processing. And even though Sony's OLED TVs are actually using LG panels, right? The processing, you can actually see some differences. And I have to say, like, as much as I love my LG OLED, sometimes the light grays, sometimes some of those gradients don't actually get translated very well. I have an older TV, so that's probably why. But that's something Sony has really worked on, things like that, and how to highlight different parts of the picture. So this cognitive processor, the way Sony pitches it, I saw some demos online. We obviously couldn't see these TVs in action, but it's sort of a real-time running filter that focuses on the things your eyes would naturally focus on as a human. So I saw a scene of the movie Sully where you could, if the camera's moving, it would stay focused on Tom Hanks's face to make sure I'm sending all of my processing juice here to make sure it looks realistic. If the camera pans around to his back, we saw all of Times Square lit up and smoke wafting off the streets. It would know to kind of focus on those things because those are what our eyes would naturally go towards. So it seems like to me, a step up from standard image processing so far, which tends to focus on edges and, oh, I see a face, but I can't actually move with that face in real time. TV processing has been kind of dumb, I think, up until now, as much as they say it's AI imbued, right?
And that's really something that we're
Hmm.
waiting for is these enhanced processing algorithms that are worth leaving on. Because that's always the
Yeah,
question, isn't
yeah,
it? Whether you're dealing with the artist's vision or whether you're getting something that's been created by this technology kind of on the display end. And that sounds like something that could be helpful in really enhancing what we're seeing instead of destroying it and throwing away information. As you mentioned, Sony, they've had impressive TVs going back years. My first HDTV, I had a Sony Vega, my
hmm
God, back in 2003. Uh, and they've always really kind of been on the cutting edge when it comes to processing technology. They're just ahead of everyone else.
hmm
And even using LG's OLED panels, that is a way that they can differentiate themselves. They have been into 8K. They've obviously had their 4K TVs out there. Did they
yeah.
mention something about the streaming or what they're doing with like kind of high bandwidth? I caught something about that in the press conference, but I
Oh, I
wasn't
may have
sure.
missed that. I may have missed that. I didn't see anything specifically, but I know. I mean, all the TV companies, I think, are also paying more attention to networking on their sets now because people don't have the best internet, and we're trying to stream high bandwidth 4K content. So I think they were talking about some wireless upgrades for some of the newer sets, but I didn't see anything specifically about streaming. Well, actually, no. You're thinking of they had like this online store where they're going to be offering some
Yes.
streaming movies. I forget the name exactly, but it's another online store. I don't think we really need more of those, but hey, it's another offer. It's another option out there. I think what's really cool is that Sony isn't like they're not pushing the tech so much right now. It's really this processing power. They haven't said anything about mini LED, which I think is kind of interesting because everybody is jumping on it this year. TCL debuted it last year with the 8 series. Now we see it from Samsung, we see it from LG, and TCL, they're going to have it in a whole bunch of their new models. So is that a miss for Sony, you think? Like, should they be trying to do mini LED right now?
It's possible. We still need to see exactly how good these new Samsung and LG
Right.
TVs are. Last year they could still very well compete, but they did have some issues. Like their 4K TVs last year were having problems with the bandwidth with the 120 hertz
Yep.
4K video. So perhaps focusing on the chips inside is really what they need to do right now.
Yeah, yeah, and it kind of makes sense too because I was talking with Kazuo Key, and you could check out some quotes from him in our Sony TV coverage at Engadget. But he is like the guy; he is the head TV processing guy, and the way he told me was this cognitive processor is really interesting for Sony because now they're dealing with 8K images, right? And that is a ton of data. It is a huge multiple, in terms of pixels over 4K even. So realistically, they can't process an entire, for 8K image frame to frame in real time. So this cognitive processor is also doing cool things like allowing them to, okay, only focus on a face because I don't have enough juice to handle the background and everything happening here. I don't know if that's going to be a bigger issue with other 8K sets. Everybody's pushing 8K this year. Sony's pushing it for TVs 80 inches and above, like I think a lot of other manufacturers are. So maybe having better processing too. This processor will help with upscaling, which is the big 8K push because there is no 8K content. We're not going to have that for a while. Maybe a successor to 4K Blu-ray, if we'll ever have another physical format, that could be a way you could bring 8K into your home, but you're not going to be streaming that anytime soon. So these companies are talking about upscaling 4K and HD and making them look better on bigger screens. So that kind of makes sense too. It's really going to be a war of processing moving forward, right? That's kind of the only way we can handle 8K at this point.
Exactly. The scaling abilities and doing that without introducing lag, particularly for
Yeah.
gaming, or introducing artifacts for your videos and your movies is the real struggle. And that's where, the difference between the companies is going to come out. We've seen TCL announce 8K for their 6 series, but can their processing keep up with a company like Sony or
Yeah.
Samsung or LG? We're going to
Yeah.
find out very soon.
I feel like that is the thing. You always lose, right? If you go for a TCL or a Vizio, it's like, yeah, you're getting a really cheap panel, but they're really cutting it in some respects. So it's like going on a really cheap airline. You really wonder if those seats are safe. Hey, I have a TCL 8 series right now. I'm really digging it, but I also know that's not going to be the thing I go to when I really want to enjoy a movie, right? Like I'm hoping to build out a home theater in my basement eventually, and I have an older LG OLED, so that's kind of where I sit with that. What do you think so far, Richard, of what Sony has announced? Seems like it's a pretty big year for them, especially with the PlayStation 5 here. That gives them a whole new piece of the puzzle, right? That a lot of other companies don't have.
Well, and I think that's where everything starts is getting the
Yeah.
PlayStation 5 because it has launched, but has it truly launched? With the console where it is, where it doesn't support extra storage or things like that, it doesn't support 8K yet. We know that this is a bit premature. This is really the early adopter, early entry launch. What will we see when more real people get their hands on the consoles and they're not having to pay scalpers $1,000 for PlayStation 5? When there's more
Yeah.
games available, when there's more exclusives, when, as you said, when maybe there's an upgraded PSVR headset in the future, what will that be like?
Mhm.
There's so much growth, and I think that's what is particularly exciting about the PlayStation 5 right now.
Yeah, if I had to put money down on like the thing I would expect next holiday season for Sony is sort of a give us a revamped PSVR, but one that uses inside out tracking, right? So it doesn't have to rely on the camera.
Yes.
Because right now you need to get a converter to use the PlayStation 4 camera on the PS5. But if you look at PCVR and things like the Oculus Quests and Quest 2, it's all really about having the sensors inside the VR headsets that can automatically detect your surroundings and everything. Because you can't rely on external sensors, at least when it comes to a game console. When I reviewed the PSVR, that whole setup of having a camera and then long wires all through my living room and having so many different things put together, it was not sustainable. My wife could barely stand it, and now that I have a 2-year-old, like, no, you can never have that
It's
connected.
just
So
not an option.
it's not doable until we hit wireless or like a good easy single wire that you just plug into one of those front USB ports and it just kind of all works. So that's kind of what I'd bet for Sony, just because they've already had the cable set up with PSVR. It would be less work for them to do that. I'm thinking about them versus Microsoft, right, which has been so quiet about 4K support on the Xbox Series X. When it has the horsepower to do it, I do wonder if they're both kind of waiting to see how wireless VR goes, but that's going to be so expensive. I don't just looking at that hardware right now on the PC side, you're spending several $100 just for a really fast wireless receiver. That's going to be a lot of tech moving forward.
And that's the
Anything
kind of
else from?
experience
Yeah.
we'd love to see, the things that I know you've talked
Yes.
about in terms of playing things like Half-Life Alyx or playing Flight Simulator in VR. It would be so incredible if you could use one of these consoles that you can basically take off of the shelf and play a real high quality virtual reality experience. But
Mhm.
the price and the technology involved in doing that, I don't know if we're going to see it this year.
It's a weird thing. Like on some level, I don't. It's fine if not everybody has access to VR right now, but for it to survive as a medium, then yeah, we kind of have to broaden support. That was the cool thing about PSVR. It was relatively inexpensive. The games were pretty good. They got the developers on board, and I think that was the key thing. Do you have any thoughts on 360 reality audio? That's not something they talked about much here, but we got more news around that too. They're going to be delivering their own speakers this spring, and this is Sony's new format that can deliver more, I don't know, immersive surround sound type audio, right?
It sounds impressive. And it
Yeah.
feels like it always sounds impressive every year at CES when they say something about surround sound and audio that involves you. But I just don't know how many people are actually going to have this, because do I need to buy the specific Sony speaker? And if I don't have it, I can't access this format. I think that's what it's kind of come down to in the past with their efforts around 360 audio. So that's really my question, because there are so many smart speakers on the market. I just don't know if I'll have
Yeah.
this one.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny because it's sort of like Sony's sweet spot, right? Like they've always been the company you go to for cool audio tech or cool video tech. And just to answer your question, I think we know the Amazon Echo Studio supports 360 reality audio because they've had that around at some of their events, at some of Sony's events.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really about these new speakers, like the HomePod, right? That have a ton of speakers around in a circular way that can mimic listening to live music, basically. I've tried it on Amazon Music because you could do some VR audio, and it's fine. It sounds good. I don't think it's like life changing or anything, right? Like I think a good pair of Sonos speakers or a good pair of bookshelves are just as good and feel just as immersive to me. So that's the real challenge for Sony, I think.
Yeah, so it's a really hard thing to sell, even if you get to a point where you can experience it and try it out. And for people who, if they don't get into, a hi-fi store and,
Yeah.
and really feel it around them, I don't know how you tell them that this experience is worth worth paying for. Exactly. It's just hard. And in the era of COVID, especially, even twice as hard at least.
Most definitely. I think maybe by putting it in cheaper devices like the Echo Studio, that is a $200 speaker, right? That's pretty inexpensive as far as high-tech speakers go. That thing sounds pretty good. It's in my kitchen right now, and when I really want to just blast it, it can really keep up, but if I want to play real music, I'm going to go to my Sonos or go to my like home theater setup or something. So it's in a weird spot. I'll be interested to see like where Sony goes with this. 360 Reality Audio also works with their headphones, where you can take photos of your ears, upload it through the Sony app, and like the headphones you're wearing, I believe. And
Yes. Yes.
yeah, and actually, it will transform the audio so that it fits your specific ear orientation well too. So they're doing some really cool stuff. I don't know if it's all going to work out, and we didn't see any of that during this CES keynote, so that's pretty surprising to me. Any
No,
further
and
thoughts,
as you
Richard?
mentioned with the
Yeah,
headphones, they're suddenly facing competition from a company like Apple selling these
yeah.
$600 earpods. And I wonder how they're going to respond to that competition. Is there another level that they can go to? They've already had a very high level headphone product. They've got the 360 audio. They have all these things together, and that's really the Sony story. That they don't just have the technology, they don't just have the displays, they also have the content. And putting all of that together, will they be able to? Uh, I just don't know yet.
Remains to be seen. Well, we will be talking to Sony of America's president tomorrow, Mike Fasulo. So I'll be asking him a lot of these questions too. So we'll hear like what Sony is actually up to. Richard, it is the end of our CS coverage right now. You're lucky because you didn't have to like see all of this in the morning. But how are you feeling about the show so far? What are you looking forward to?
I'm feeling pretty good. I wish the show were still on Pacific time. It was the best thing it had
Yeah.
going for it in the past. But I'm really not that upset that I can enjoy it from home. As I've said to my friends many times, I feel when I was there, I felt like people at home saw more of the show than I did, because I could only see maybe one or two things at any particular time. When you're at home, you can really see everything. And that's going to be incredible for us this year.
Excellent. Yeah. You know, I kind of feel the same way. We were talking about this in our roundtable too. I do miss going and seeing these Sony TVs, or going like, we can actually both go and look at these TVs, and then I will argue with you about how good that TV is compared to the other TVs. Yes. And that was always a fun CES experience. We can't really do that now. The best I have to go for is I was on a Zoom chat with some Sony people, and they showed me some demos of this cognitive processor, and I guess that's a sense of how it works, but it's not quite the same. Not at all.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, everybody. Anything else you want to mention, Richard, about Sony, or your thoughts about where they're headed?
At this point, I am still blown away by how short that press conference was. And it's kind of astounding, because this is the company that saw no problem in bringing out people like, who have I seen at Sony press conferences? I've seen Kelly Clarkson. I've seen Will Smith.
Yeah.
And now
we saw Michael Bay.
15-minute video.
No, that was Samsung. Yeah.
That was Samsung. Yes.
That was Samsung.
And now it's a 15-minute video, and we're out.
The funny thing is that it's usually Samsung and Sony that have the biggest CES keynotes, right? And Samsung has gotten bigger and bigger, but usually it's Sony at the end of the first day. And it seems like kind of a whimper for them to end out on. Hopefully, maybe we'll see some more news from Sony. I'd love to chat with them more. Well, yeah, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. Stay tuned tomorrow. Join us again starting at 9 a.m. for, I believe, General Motors conference, and we'll be doing this live coverage all day. Richard Lawler, thank you so much for joining us. Where can we find you on the internet?
You can find me on Twitter at RJCC, and, of course, on Engadget.com. Thank you for having me, Devendra.
No problem. Thanks for joining. And you guys can find me at Devendra on Twitter. Stay tuned to Engadget.com, everybody. We've got a lot more CES 2021 news coming.